I want to talk about portraits and forced family pictures and, or relationship, couple pictures, and what that's all about, in my opinion, from my observation. So that means from my own point of view. So please don't take offense if I say something about an idea of somebody's intent who, wants to round other people up for group photo. We can make some exceptions. There's going to be outliers that don't fall into what I'm saying, or what I will say in this video, which is that I don't think people who generally, so it becomes a mark of their character, care so much about optics to pressure family members for, aesthetically, fashioned photos, and where there's smiles, and or there's just it's all preconceived. I don't think that people who operate in that manner with such an appeal to optics really are happy. I think those people are actually miserable. A lot of them. Again, there are going to be outliers who just want to, capture a moment. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the people who, and we all have seen people like this, if we've lived long enough. People who go out of their way to appeal to optics. And so they will pay, an arm and a leg for, a professional photographer to, what I'm saying? And these are the same people who, in the old, days of standing still for the artist, would have, pressured, others to, take the portrait, paint me, depict me, because you didn't have photographs back then, obviously. But other parts of it, portraits are concerned with tradition, and so some people who are, in portraits, they probably didn't want to be in them, but they had to, they felt, and probably were somewhat forced, because of the tradition. You're a descendant of this, they had a portrait, so you must, because you're a descendant. But think of who would create a law like that, though. It's not really a law, but like a tradition like that of taking, a portrait of everybody. That is the same kind of person who in modern times appeals to optics. 100% appealing to optics. And those people are miserable, in my opinion. I mean, and one of the things I've noticed is that it tends to be women. Now, this is not in every case, no doubt, right? A world that's as full as ours is, not in every cases it's going to be a woman, but in the majority of cases, it usually tends to be a woman. It also tends to be a woman who has, become married, so it's a married woman. And it also tends to be a woman who who has had a string of, you know, ooh before she got married. Those are three things I've noticed. I'd be interested to find out if anybody else has, paid attention to that sort of archetype that's going on there. That sort of, because I see it. I see that. Those tend to be the sorts of women who push for an appeal to optics. It's never the girl who was wholesome from the start. It's never the girl who it feels, I shouldn't say feels, but uh, understands she's blue collar. No, it's always these girls who climb up the ladder of this, they climb up the economic ladder by way of hypergamy, um, you know, middle class hypergamy. It's not high class hypergamy. They are wealthy, but it's middle class wealth. It's like they, it's mid to high tier middle class wealth that they climb up to. They don't, it's not billionaire woman who has such an appeal for optics. Billionaire woman is being hounded by, paparazzi, maybe. I don't know. I don't know too many billionaire women, obviously, right? But it tends to be this archetype that I see tends to be middle tier to high tier middle class woman. And, they have that history of ooh-ahing, if you know what I mean. And, until they found someone to marry who was, located slash situated really, um, you know, between, middle tier to high tier middle class, in terms of economic, independence, financial independence. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I think these people are miserable, because to appeal to optics, here's another thing to mention. These women tend to have a very polished approach to, caking on the makeup, so to speak. It's very polished. That's an interesting thing to point out, because that's not every woman who wears makeup. Not every woman who wears makeup, tries to make it polished looking. That to me, that polished touch, that has to do with something psychological, and consciously psychological. That hasn't got anything to do with unconscious, psychological reasoning, right? But if you're polishing it up, it's because you have a conscious intention. Anyway, that's, my little, pretend to be Freud. But yeah, I think these people, these people are sad, really sad, in the sense that by appealing to optics, what you are really suggestive of, what you are really exempling, through your output. So what can be, perceived versus received. what you're really exampling is regrets. Could be sexual regret, could be familial regret. You might regret having more than one child. I know, I heard something somewhere, I can't recall at the moment, that said that women tend to be happy with just the one child after they give birth for the first time. And then, it's usually men who pressure their wives to have more than one child. And look, I understand that, because I understand that, they're not wanting to have more than one child, because, I mean, it's a child's responsibility. And, most people are not physiologically and cognitively, benefited by nature to be able to take care of that sort of responsibility. I think more people shouldn't have children who do. And I think that current social system issues that fuel divisions. I think that's due to there are a lot of people who have had kids who shouldn't have had kids, and there's just a lot of people who are unequipped to be responsible as individuals, and so they shouldn't really get involved in families. And anyway, that's besides the point. Okay, the point is, this archetype, they tend to be expressing regret, but through a guise of everything's perfect, my life's great, I just learned how to surf at 35, I'm wonderful and all that. But you can tell that's, if you have to tell somebody about that, if you have to make it public, then it's not really natural, it's artificial. This appeal to optics from this particular archetype that I mentioned is artificial. And what is that artificial affect? What is that artificial fashion? All fashion's kind of artificial, but what is that abnormal artificial fashion? Like, you're no longer like, 28 or something. You're 35. Why are you talking about, learning how to surf at 35? It was such a phony sort of affect and everything. Well, what's up with that shit? That shit is due to you trying to create a background that isn't there to your character. That's what I think it is with this archetype. I think people who fall into appealing to optics so much, and you know who I'm talking about, somebody who meets this archetype, right? I think the issue with them is that they didn't develop their character. They didn't cultivate their character. They didn't evolve their character whilst they were growing up, because all they were working on was their station in life. And then so they got to be, 35 or 40, whatever, and they had a good career, they have a good career. They have, financial stability, all this glitter, but remember the words of Shakespeare, all that glitters is not gold, all that glitters is not gold, meaning all that looks like it's for certain, right? All that looks like it's, this is certainly what it claims to be is not. It lacks the certainty, because the real certainty, the real gold, that's in your character, the content of your character. Martin Luther King Jr. He spoke about, wishing people be judged on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. And this isn't a video touching on the subject of race, but taking that part about wanting to be judged by the content of your character, that is really how people judge you at the end of the day. And I think what the people who appeal so much to optics, I mean, the people who sign up to star on Desperate Housewives of this, that, or the other place, I mean, Real Housewives. Desperate Housewives was actually a decent show, but Real Housewives of this, that, or the other place. Real Housewives of, Nantucket. These people who fit their archetype, these people are trying to feign content of character, and it's not working. It's just not working. I mean, I think this is a similar thing is going on with the thoughts. You know what I'm saying? If you know about the thoughts on the Instagram, all those Instagram thoughts out there, the Instagram thoughts, they are trying to convince you they have content of character. It's just like, Justin Bieber writing in Anne Frank's diary, I think you would have been a believer or some shit, that is such trying to feign content of character. It's that, you see a lot of that nowadays. This appeal to optics, it's driven by this lack of character. There's no real substantive content to their character. And that's why they spend so much time powdering their nose and straightening their hair. That's why they spend so much time, going to clothing stores and just looking around. You're at a clothing store, buy something. Why are you just standing around talking, having, chit-chat conversation at a clothing store? You could do that on a park bench. You could do that from the comfort of your own living room. Instead, you're in a clothing store, browsing your fingers through, clothes you can't afford, and talking out your things there, man. Like, that's just sad. And the reason why it's sad is because it's like, you don't have a life. You're somebody, as in you are somebody, right? But you're not someone. You're not connected to others, really. And I think a lot of these thoughts are lonely and miserable. I think a lot of the people, just like anyone who fits that archetype, is lonely and miserable because they've spent all their energy, all their developmental years when the developmental ability was at its best, they spent all that time improving their physical station in life. But now the metaphysical concern comes in. I'm empty. There's nothing here. I don't know how to relate to someone on a deep level. I don't know how to connect to someone. That's the thing. Because, I made a video before called Relationships versus Connectionships. You might want to check that out. No pressure. But basically in that video I explained how people really want connectionships. They just delude themselves into thinking they want relationships. And there's so much media pressure to go after relationships. But people want connectionships. They want to connect. They want through thick and thin, through hell and high water. That's what they want. And I think that these people who appeal so much to optics, who fit that archetype, they want that too, as everybody does, but they can't get it anymore. Or I think this is more accurate. it's going to be such a goddamn difficult challenge for them to get to fill themselves up with real content of character, that they would rather just pretend. They'd rather just try to hook you in with their physical appeal. So they spend all their time hair and makeup, blah 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 blah. Let's get some more glitter. You know, they spend all their time, you know, uh, dreaming about purchasing new clothing. You know, that let's, you know, carry on with the fashionable trends. They, you know, they buy, you know, they buy a playlist on Spotify. They have a Spotify, but they buy a playlist on Spotify, and they fill it up with a whole bunch of new top 100 music that, you know, they can't even relate to anymore. It's like it's generations, you know, past their understanding of social dynamics and everything, and what's, you know, called soul or anything like that. You know, and then they go around saying, I listen to this, I listen to Ariana Grande. Wow. I listen to Taylor Swift. Wow. You know, I listen to her new songs. Wow. When in reality, you don't listen to shit. You know, you just buy it because it's being promoted. You know, the people who fit this archetype, they buy this shit because it's being promoted, because it appeals to optics. And the reason why they are slaves to appealing to optics is because they lack content of character. They didn't develop it. And now they're trying to feign it, you know? And they can't. You can't feign it. You either developed it or you didn't. And you can still develop it. I'm not saying it's doomed, right? You know, I'm not saying you can't develop content of character, but it's hard. And you passed up on the challenge when you were younger, so you're going to have to work twice as hard to get to the same level, you know, of metaphysical connectivity, right? You're going to have to try twice as harder, you know, thrice as harder, 100 times as harder, because you never focused on it. But anyway, yeah, that's just something I wanted to talk about. You know, and it's just something to think about. Have a good day. Peace. Meow.